Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, Season 2, Episode 28. This is another Greatest Hits episode where I talk about, I interview my mom. As I know many of you already know, my mother lost her battle to cancer. It's had a great impact between moving and this. It's really sort of thrown off the show, and I do apologize for that for anyone who's been eagerly waiting for episodes. So I'm putting together this special episode where I interviewed my mom, and I'm re-releasing it here. And hopefully next week we'll begin Season 3. Thank you very much. Hello, welcome to the World Builders Anvil. Today's topic, the scariest interview ever. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram, and I'm hoping everyone had a good Christmas out there. I have a special interview today. This is one of the 2 weeks I said last year I would not do shows on because it's about family, it's about fun. But as I told you guys, basically the Thanksgiving week, the audience in a way is kind of the family. And so I decided to do a very special episode today. And it's going to be interviewing my mother. We will call her Darlene for sake of anonymity. And shh, don't laugh, mother. And really the reason I wanted to do it was my mom had a huge influence on me as a world builder growing up, and my love for fantasy. She fed me books is kind of the way I looked at it. She fed me books. She made sure I got to go out to Star Wars. She did all these things for me. And as I started growing up and getting out in the world, I realized something very interesting. And that was, wait a second, I think my mom likes this stuff too. She's sending me books when I'm in Germany, but then she has all of these books that she's buying and reading and then sending to me. And, she's making sure I go see movies as a teenager, which she wouldn't have to if she didn't necessarily want to see them either. And what's really amazing was, I'm older. I'm in my 40s. When I was a kid, there was a lot of stuff wrapped around where I had trouble reading because I had an eye issue. And my mom caught onto this very quickly, and she kind of fought with the schools to get it listened to. And I didn't capture on to the love of reading and of fiction until I was a bit older than my sisters because of this. And then I started playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends. And about that time, the church came out, and being a good religious family, we listened to the church usually, and they essentially said Dungeons and Dragons is bad. Now, Dungeons and Dragons is probably what specifically led me down the path of world building. And so I thought this would be a very interesting conversation to sort of get my mom's perspective on all of this stuff. So how you doing today, Mommy?
I'm doing very well, son. Thank you. How are you doing today?
Probably a bit colder than you. I hope you're enjoying California out there.
I am. I'm looking at a beautiful rainbow.
Yeah, I'm looking at a beautiful trace amounts of snow across the ground. Strangely, the weather seems a bit different here on the northeast coast.
Yeah.
So now I have to ask you, I typically ask this of all of the people I've interviewed so far, and I'm going to have to ask you the same thing. Do you feel orc or do you feel elf today?
I suppose elf, because orcs to me are the bad guys, and I don't like the bad guys. You know that.
I would thought you were going to say orc myself, but
no, that would be your part, love.
I was going to say the years of bad influence on my part have not yet won the battle.
No, you haven't.
Unfortunate. Well, I still have years to go. So, all right. Now, let's kind of hop into this. Now, I kind of want to get into this from your perspective. Um, I can see a lot of sort of events in my life that kind of led me to becoming a world builder. You know, when did you first sort of get the appearance that I was kind of off the course in sort of the world building storytelling kind of fashion?
I can't specifically say an age. It's just that you mentioned the eye problem, which bothered me. And as you said, your dad and I had to fight to get attention in the proper way for this. And once you started reading The Lord of the Rings,
Hmm.
and you were so excited about it, and I was excited because you were actually reading. And we'd done all those eye exercises and all that kind of junk for, months and months on end. And I finally began to see the results of it, and I was thrilled. And because as a parent, you try to encourage your kids and help them if there's a problem in something. And I felt like we were finally beginning to see the sunshine again when you started to read. So since you read it and were so excited about it and you asked me, I thought, yeah, I'll read it if I can possibly get through it. And, of course, I was hooked. I always liked science fiction, and I had never read anything quite like the fantasy ones. And but I just fell in love with it. I've read the trilogy of The Lord of the Rings many, many times.
Yeah. Now, do you have any idea how many fantasy novels you've bought in your life at this point? I have no clue.
I have no clue either. But once you started on the Dragonlance books, and then when you ended up in Germany, I thought the best was just an easy way to keep in touch and something that we both liked. And so I would buy the new books as they came out in paperback
Yeah.
and read them, of course, and then send them to you so that you and your friends would have them to pass around and read and talk about and do. I never played any of the games with you or anything, but we did provide a place for you to have your friends come to the house and do that. So
Yes, you did. Now, I do have to correct you on one thing. You did play one fantasy game with me once, and you taught me a valuable lesson. I don't remember how old I was. I was still a kid, and it was around this time. I got some game called Dungeon, and you beat me at the game, and I kind of changed the rules, and then I ended up winning with my modified rules. And you said, "Okay, good job, but we're not going to play again because you're a cheater." And I don't know if you remember that moment or not, but it actually taught me a very valuable lesson. I've learned to this day that winning isn't more important than playing.
That's true, and I'm glad you learned that lesson because that is one of my big things. You can't have a good time if you don't do things together.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody cheats, it's not fun.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Taught me a lesson, but no, my mom never role played with me, very disappointingly, but not her cup of tea, which is fair. But now, before you got into fantasy, you did have a science fiction background, which I think opened you up towards the fantasy stuff when you started reading it. And I kind of know a bit of it, but what are sort of like the first like kinds of science fiction that caught your attention when you were growing up? And I'm sure you didn't. I don't know if that was a thing where you consider yourself a science fiction geek back then or not, but about what time did you realize that you really liked the science fiction side of things?
Oh, well, I probably was still in school. I grew up on a farm, and I didn't have a lot of time to read. And there were times when I read that my mother got very upset with me because I was reading instead of doing something else. But
there were chores to do, huh?
There were chores to do, yes. But I really I enjoyed Asimov and several others. I think I just enjoyed the challenge of picturing these different creatures or seeing their world in my mind as I read the books. I guess I have a fertile imagination or something because I just enjoyed it. It's funny. Your dad and I would talk about him. He said, "I don't see how you can read that stuff. It makes no sense."
It's dribble. And
Yeah.
I have to give my daddy a lot of credit. My dad is not a fan of the genre stuff, either science fiction or fantasy. He'll watch some of it. Like if basically because mom's watching it or we're watching it. But he did his best to never try and squash my love for it. And I appreciate it because that's as much of it, helping me get to where I am as my mom feeding me the stuff. And of course, it would have been hard with you liking it too. But
Well, a parent's got to do what a parent's got to do, Jeff.
No, it's one thing I've always been very blessed, and both my parents have always been very good and supportive of my insanities. And I also remember very early in my age, and this is when I started reading Dragonlance, where I tried to write my first story, and I gave it to my mom to read, and I thought it was brilliant. I very much see myself as the kid from Christmas Story, that kind of weird imagination going on in my head, and my mom corrected it, and it annoyed me, and I don't think I picked up a pen for years outside of school after that. So,
Oh dear.
I love storytelling, but I had to get to a point where I wanted to share it before I could really focus on writing, because it is actually a lot of work.
Yes, it is a lot of work, and it's something you have to pay attention to and think through. And when you read it, you have to be objective. Can it make sense? Can you, in your mind, make it make sense? I have started books and said, well, that's one I'm not going to read.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't hang together. So.
Now, outside of the Dragonlance stuff, were there other fantasy genres or fantasy books that you kind of got into? I know there were some other Dungeons and Dragons lines of books or other stuff. So besides the ones we've talked about, are there any other ones that kind of still stick in your mind?
Well, I don't specifically remember all. I read them and enjoyed them and sent them on to you. And, then it was been there, done that. That was fun, but moving on. I still actually had other chores to do then, too.
Excuses.
But one of the things I will mention is the Harry Potter books. Because my grandson read them and fell in love with the first one and said, Nana, you have to read this because, and that started me there, and I thought, yeah, these are interesting stories. I can go there. Mm-hmm. So that led into the Harry Potter to the next generation.
Speaking of the next generation, you are a huge Star Trek geek as well.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you remember the original from when it aired. Did you get a chance to actually watch that on TV when it aired, or did you have to wait a few years until it was on reruns before you saw it?
No, I watched the Star Trek from the very beginning, I think. I seldom missed it. It's one of the few things that I went out of my way to watch when it came on TV, because I often had a lot of other things to do. And I did that. I watched it very much. I also like Westerns, so I always watched Rawhide when it was on, and those kinds of things. But no, I fell in love with Star Trek. It was the most realistic science fiction show I had ever seen at that point, I think.
Yeah, no, it was very cool, and I remember, was it in the early '80s when they came out with the first movie? And I remember going to see that with you. Mm-hmm. I don't remember seeing the first Star Wars.
Really?
I don't. I know you took us, but I think I was still a little too young for it to. I'd say I remember like loving it, and I remember Empire Strikes Back, and I remember the excitement as that was getting ready to come out, and I remember going to see that one. But I actually don't really remember the experience of seeing Star Wars the first time.
You were 7.
Yeah,
For all,
yeah, I was a little
yeah,
brat.
yeah. Well, that was yes, without saying, dear.
No.
Yeah.
Now, my love for maps. Maps, in case you don't know, are sort of an important thing for world building. Did you ever have an idea that I was into maps growing up?
Well, yes, but we always, even kind of just as a family, enjoyed traveling, even if only you were talking about it.
Hmm.
And you always
You could
enjoyed
do that with
geography.
maps. Hmm.
And yes, and so you look up places on your maps and see where they are and, how far is that, and you talk about that and stuff. And I always liked maps too. I guess that's why we click on so many things like that. I've always found maps to be interesting. I still watch the paper map, when we're traveling in the RV and stuff. I just enjoy it. But
Yeah,
over the
there's something
years,
about the paper maps in
all
the hands.
all over the years, the National Geographic magazines came and the magazines went. The maps always stayed. The maps always were Jeffries. I think I probably even sent you a few when you were in Germany.
Yeah, I believe you did. I think I occasionally got them until Aiden realized he
Yeah,
liked maps, and then the
that's
little thief
right.
started stealing them all.
That's right. Then the grandson started getting the maps.
Which who could deny who could deny maps to different generation? Yeah, no, I always like maps because it's the first step towards fantasy world building in my brain, because it's like you said, you can sit there, you can open up, you can imagine what it's like, and especially with the National Geographic, where you get a map, but they have like articles and stuff talking about the area and the people and how they dress. And I always found it really fascinating, looking at cultures that were different than ours. You know,
Right, right.
it's like Europe's neat, and I love traveling to Europe. But especially in a National Geographic, it's nothing like seeing some part of the world that maybe you don't want to travel to because it's too remote for you. Maybe too many dangerous creatures live there, like Australia. Um,
Oh dear. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's one of the things that I like about maps is because you can use your imagination and then when, like you say, the National Geographics, I have always loved because of the beautiful pictures and the articles, and you could read about these places that you knew you probably would never get to go.
yeah,
Um, so it made another part of the world that you really didn't know much about, other than the name of it, be a real place when you could see the pictures and the people that lived there and read about how they lived.
yeah. And I kind of think, in a way, it was Lord of the Rings got me to love fantasy, but it was maps and geography that got me to want to be a world builder. Because it was like one of my flaws, or one of the aggravations I always had as a kid, and you probably don't know this, is when I was playing the games, the worlds just never quite seemed real enough for me.
Hmm.
They were neat, and I love elves and I love orcs, and you have to have fake stuff in there. But like
Hmm.
the cultures never seem to be rich like you could get in a culture, you know, halfway around the world. And I don't know. That's, I think, one of the things that sort of really got me going world building. And then obviously the fun with kids. Now I want to step back for a second and go back to Dungeons and Dragons, because one of the things I remember, growing up was, in general, as a child, beware to cross adults even when they're wrong. You're going to get in trouble if you cross an adult. And uh
Yeah, that was
and
true, I think.
that was true for the most part. However, how come when it came to Dungeons and Dragons, not only did you stand up for me against adults, but you did it to the church, which, growing up as a religious farm girl, that must have been kind of a tough thing to do. I don't know, maybe because you're a tough woman that wasn't, but do you remember that event? Can you go back there for a moment?
Yes, actually, I do, because the pastor was talking to me about it, and as you said, he disapproved of it because of some of the more gross-looking characters in it, and the fact that you should be reading the Bible, which I have to agree with. I still do that, but fantasy isn't wrong either. And I just felt so strongly. It was like Santa Claus. Some people say you lie to your kids if you say there is a Santa Claus. But I totally believe in Santa Claus, even still today. And so it was just that I felt it was important enough. I knew what a difference it had made in your life, and it encouraged you, and that's what I tried to explain to him. And I said, as long as a parent, I know what's going on in my son's life, and I can watch for problems that come up, then I don't see that it's a problem. It's something that makes him read. It makes his imagination work. It makes him dig into things that he otherwise wouldn't be doing anything worthwhile. He'd probably be getting into trouble. So,
I never did that. I was an angel.
Oh, well, I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that one, dear.
Now, I'm sitting here looking at my book collection right now. And I have all kinds of odd books, like a book about games throughout the world, mythology, which isn't too shocking, art, architecture books, language books, philosophy books. I'm not sure when I started getting these kinds of books, and maybe it was when I was role playing, but do you remember me having a weird eclectic collection of nonfiction books when I was growing up, or is that something that I kind of came into later, and I'm not really sure how it started, but it's filled my library now?
I think that a lot of those came to you as you began to grow older. You didn't have so much of them. There were books like that around because we all liked books, and we all liked something a little bit different. Anita was always, and Jenny too for that matter, both absolutely avid readers of nonfiction as well as fiction. And so I know you were subjected to and had the opportunity to read those. Yeah. It's just that the fantasy and science fiction books were what got your interest and got you started. Yeah. And without that start, reading is so very important. And you can do anything you want to if you learn to read. And it's just such an important basic building block of your life to be able to read well. And so it was something that was extremely important. And we've encouraged all three of you to read and enjoy books. I used to read to the family, especially when we would be on a long car trip, like going down to Nana and Papa's.
Are we there yet?
Well, we didn't really do that because I would be reading The Borrowers, and then Dad would say, you can't read any more of that unless we're all there, because he wanted to know what happened too.
That was always a good thing with Daddy. It's like, it wasn't his kind of stuff, but he liked to know the ends of stories. He couldn't do without that. So
right.
So definitely the love of storytelling, but more of a Tom Clancy kind of guy.
Yes, very much a Tom Clancy, and I love those books too. Those were ones that he and he bought them as a hardback when they came out, which I thought was disgraceful.
Just wait another 6 months,
huh? The paperback. But he bought the hardback books, but as soon as he was done reading them, I had no problem picking them up and reading them. So.
Well, if he's going to waste the money on them like that, spend
That's right, Yeah. Then the Windsor Locks Library was eventually much richer for his avid book buying, and he traveled so much that he would buy them because that's what he saw that he wanted to read. And then later, Jenny, when they lived in Windsor Locks, she took a bunch of the books when knew we were going to be selling the house there, and started donating them to the Windsor Locks Library. So I hope that there are a lot of other people that have gotten to read, and as you say, it's really an eclectic mix of all kinds of books to read. So,
well, I think that's the greatest thing. It's like most of the books that I get, unless they're for reference purposes, I like to give them away if I enjoyed them.
Yes.
because if you get anything out of them, it's worth passing it on to someone else. So maybe they will get more, maybe they'll get less, but then they can pass it on. But that's the great thing about books is you can hand them on to someone else.
That's true. That is true. And we've shared a lot of them. When Anita got married and we moved away from where she was, we'd send her books. When she was young married, she didn't have money to buy the books. So when one of us or both of us would read them, and then we'd talk to her about it, and she'd say, "Yeah, go ahead and send it to me. I'll read it." So books have been just an important thing for all of us as a family.
Now, I have to ask you this as a person who's seasoned in reading. Ebooks, do you like them? I know it's different than reading a book, but are you getting into the ebook scene? Do you not prefer them, or is there circumstances in which you prefer them or not?
Actually, I like both. I love my iPad and my Kindle app that is on there, because in that one small, or even that on my phone too, I can carry many, many books. And when I have to wait in the waiting room at the doctor's office, I used to do stuff like that, take a book with me when I was at soccer practice with you, or something like that. And it was my downtime, but I could read and just put my bookmark in and go back. And I still can do that. So I still have a handful of books that I love, and you kids will have to get rid of them someday when I'm gone, because I love to read them again, and I don't mind sitting and reading the book, the actual physical book. But I love the ebooks. I love being able to carry such a huge variety of things around with me.
Yeah, no, I think I'm kind of in line with you on that one too. It's like there is something special about having a physical book in your hand. And for certain, especially like my reference kind of books, I do like that. But there's something awesome about having that library at your fingertips. And like you said, I've actually started getting a larger screen. And in part, it's like the smaller screens on the phones are a little too small. And I don't like reading the ebooks. But if they're a little bit bigger phones, I can sit there and read the books on them and it doesn't bother me. Maybe because I feel like I'm not getting any headway if I like my finger's sore and I've gone 3 pages, but
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so
I
that's one of the reasons
reading on my iPad, because it's a bigger screen and you can do a lot more reading before you have to flip the page. But I also enjoy sitting down in a comfortable chair and maybe putting a napkin over my legs and just opening a favorite book. And I feel like I'm visiting with old friends. And it can be just about any kind of a book that I read again and again.
So now, are you like me and then disappointed there are no novels for the Stargate universe?
Yes, I must say I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it's funny because when we saw the first Stargate movie, and then we heard that there was going to be a TV series, I thought, how in the world can they make a TV series about that?
Yeah.
It made no sense. And then, oddly enough, you got me hooked on that one, too.
Well, it's funny because that one, for me, I was very suspicious. It's like I was a huge fan of MacGyver, and I couldn't see it when it first came out. So I'm not sure when I started watching it, but it was a season or two into it starting, I believe. And but once I got started, boy, I could not stop.
Well, I tell you, I've got all 10 seasons of it on DVDs. So, and your dad cracks up when I start watching them. I don't even bring them when we travel in the motorhome because there's too many of them. The last few years they were really nice and thin. But when you get 10 years worth of those things, that's a lot of just to carry around for one thing. So I watch those at home. But I still love them. I sit down and enjoy watching them. But again, it's because it's done well enough you have to have an imagination, and you have to be able to bridge the gap that these aren't all what we would call humans. They don't look like us, and they don't live the same way we do, and all that kind of stuff. You have to be broad-minded to be able to deal with it. But that's what I like about it. I thought that they were believable, and it is another one of those series that your dad would sit and watch with me every time it was on, because I enjoyed it, and then we'd talk about it. He does not watch the old DVDs with me, though. At least, well, he does sometimes.
Now I got to ask, there's a plethora of stuff coming out, right, over the last couple of years. It seems to be sort of more science fiction, more fantasy stuff than have ever been made before. And comic book stuff. Have you gotten into any of the comic book stuff, or have you not started any of that?
Comic books?
Not reading them, but the comic book movie stuff and TV shows.
I don't know what there is about them, but I don't find those as interesting. And I can take them or leave them. We see I see an Avengers movie every once in a while. If Dad's got it on TV and he's watching it, I'll sit down and watch with him. But it's not something that I would go out of my way to, watch. Now, if Star Wars started on TV again, or he puts in the DVD, I'm going to sit down and watch every one of them with him again. But not the comic book stuff so much for me. I don't know why.
Okay, no, that's cool. I do have to suggest for you Deadpool. I think you'd really enjoy that one. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not. I got kind of accused by my wife of somehow being connected to the character, so it's sort of a naughty Jeff.
Okay. Imagine that one.
I know, huh?
Now I can.
Apparently someone has. All right. Now, history's part of it too for me. It's like, right. I think history and culture play a lot into it. As far as I remember back, I've been into history as much as geography, or did history kind of come later in your mind?
No. History was something that always very much interested you. And one of the things that I remember most clearly was the book about the Roman Empire that you used to get on a regular basis.
Library?
The library. And then finally you would take it back and renew it. And then finally I would say, look, you have to leave that in the library for at least 2 weeks so that somebody else can use that book if they want to. And then I'd let you get it.
I've never found a copy of that book anywhere for sale. It's very, very sad.
That's too bad.
I don't even remember the name of that book anymore. I had that book, I don't know, for probably 2 or 3 years. I think I had that book checked out.
Oh yeah. Every time we go back, unless I absolutely forbade you to renew it and leave it in the library so somebody else could see it and use it and know that it existed, you would renew it, and they never complained. So
probably not one of those high demand books of theirs.
No, I would guess it probably wasn't.
Well, all right, Mommy. So do you have any other parting thoughts, parting things, interesting things that you're looking forward to out there in the science fiction or fantasy world, the weird genre stuff? I know you're not a horror person.
No, I'm not a horror person at all. They just said the second of the new Star Wars movies is coming out soon. So naturally, I want to go see that.
I think it might have came out last night. Rogue One, yeah.
Well, I think some people were able to see it, but I thought it was in the next day or two that it was supposed to open, across the country. I don't know. I don't watch much TV, but when we're living in the motorhome, I can't get completely away from it. So I hear snippets of things. So I get more than I do at home, where I just can avoid the TV altogether. I'm looking forward to seeing the new Star Wars ones. I was thrilled when the first one came out. I suppose partly because the people that were in the original Star Wars ones were
tied in it. Yeah.
Yeah, were brought into the thing. So I'm looking forward to that. Otherwise, I'm not too much into that right now. I'm crocheting and doing needlework and stuff like that, and been getting settled here where we are right now, and getting everything in order. So it doesn't take too long to clear up in the motorhome, so that's always helpful.
Less room for Dad to make a mess too. So.
Well, that's true too. That's true too. He just turns on all the lights and leaves them on.
All right. Well, I do love you, Mommy. I'm gonna let you go here, and thank you so much for coming on. I know this is sort of a weird thing for you, but for some reason I got a bug and I just needed to do it. So I appreciate you putting up with some weird questions for a little while for me.
That's fine. I love you too, son. I'm glad I could help.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.